Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Hello, my friends. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your practice. Thank you for your dedication to your Buddha, to the Buddha, the enlightenment, the full enjoyment of your life, the experience of all your potential. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, do it right now so we can appease the YouTube algorithm deities. Anyway, just to make it easier for people to find us, for people to connect with our Sangha, to help them to fully experience their potential. Yeah. All right. Another exciting, beautiful day in our solar system, in our galaxy, in our universe. Let us continue with the BDK English Tripitaka translation of the VairochanaBhiSambodhi Sutra. So far, it's been pretty interesting, right? The rhetoric, the words used, although there's still the difficulty of translation bias, but the words, for the most part, pretty accurate, pretty similar to what I've been talking about with Nichiren's writings, Shakyamuni's ultimate sutra, teaching of the Lotus Sutra. There's a tremendous consistency here, albeit from different echelons of understanding, of insight, of capacity to mentally develop the ideas that inspire us to practice. Another way to look at that is that we live in an age of such incredible degeneration of all aspects of society. Certainly, our minds are now in many ways, the product of society, the means by which money can be amassed. We are like products on a shelf. Our minds are treated that way. And as such, we're constantly being inundated, trained, influenced by marketing slogans. It's amazing we still know how to think. A lot of what we do isn't thinking, it's repetition, it's memetics, it's memory, it's not actual understanding. The word we're looking for here that's been missing out of public education for decades now is criticality, critical thinking. To be critical thinking doesn't mean that you're a critic. It doesn't mean that you criticize everything. Although that word has come to mean negativity, criticizing is to dissect. Now, your agenda may be to dissect in order to promote a certain negative point of view, to justify your negative pitch. But criticism is a fundamental part of the mind, right? We catalog, we qualify, we data recognition, everything. That's what human beings do. But it's also how we live, how we survive, how do we know what to eat, what not to eat, how we, right, think. We have to discern life affirming from life unaffirming. Otherwise, we perish. But learning how to apply that skill so that it influences toward life-affirming understanding, insight, and therefore behavior that mirrors that life-affirming 3,000 realms in every single thought moment. Now you understand why there's the 84,000 teachings of Buddhism? It's all a training of the mind to be critical, to be able to accurately perceive without the encumbrance of propaganda, of ownership, of emotions, and just see clearly. Then there's a different emotion. When we talk about Buddhist compassion, Buddhist joy, we're not talking about, yay, it's my birthday. We're talking an entirely different field of energy. The kind of field a mother feels and experiences at the birth of a child. There's no other joy like that. There's no other accomplishment like that. There's no other conjoined resolve, commitment, a connection made than that. Right? Men have historically been very jealous of that. It's an extremely powerful thing. And so laws have been created to protect that, or to guard against or punish those that might infringe on that. Also, it's just think about the constructs of society for any amount of time, and you will come to criticality and its implementation. And that's the tricky part. As Buddhists, we align our mind, train our mind to a life-affirming experience of, you can call it truth, but what is that truth? It's a finely discerning, critical eye that, because of samsaric identity, we are overwhelmed by the immensity, because we are birthed each and every moment. This entire universe is birthed every single moment. Okay, I hear that, Sifu, but I don't know that I experience it well. Chant. Get a proper mandala, enshrine it so that it's respected, because it is the portal that you're going to use with all of your earthly senses to zap through time-space. Because if any of you have chanted for a while, and I don't mean, years of your life, although that too, but you sit in front of your mandala and you chant for a while, and time and space disappear. You may not be conscious of it because no time-space, but your mind escapes that attachment. And now you're free, you're liberated in the moment that you're chanting. Try that next time you're chanting. Look at the Myoho characters on your mandala. Focus in on them. Drill your mind onto those two characters. You'll see the rest of the mandala, of course. But travel. Let your mind be. Unleash it. Stop thinking about, okay, I'm going to do this for 10 minutes. Let me watch the clock. Stop it. Stop attaching yourself to this moment by moment possession of stuff and just let yourself go. I'm going into Buddha. Make a sci-fi out of it. I'm going into Buddha. I'm going to experience Buddha. This is what I'm doing right now. This is what Namu I'm doing. Myoho Renge Kyo. All of us train, even for the same things, differently. We all have different minds, different aspects of mind, karmically, right? So search for your path to get you to that timeless, spaceless experience of being. Try it. So, we heard the Lord of Mysteries. I'd like to find a different translation for that name. But a bodhisattva dwelling in the samadhi that removes all obscurations will, through the power of his conviction and understanding, and without prolonged exertion, satisfy all the dharmas, attributes of the Buddha. Right? We read that we went through that in the last video. So now they're going to, this Lord of Mysteries is going to repeat his question in prose, in the song of the sermon. Now, here's something I want you to notice. We talked a lot about, I certainly talked a lot about dissecting, being critical of the words so far. But you'll notice in every sutra, there's palaver, and then there's this prose section. And in every instance, I want you to pay special attention to these words, because there are going to be concepts and words and ideas in these sentence by sentence recitations that you didn't hear in the palaver, in the preamble. That's because these prose sections, this is the teaching, this is the sermon. This is the core of what Shakyamuni was preaching. This is what is memorized by each individual, you and I, as we learn and repeat and memorize this constant reminder of this teaching. The rest of it that isn't in prose is what gets shifted depending on the audience of Shakyamuni. Okay, here's the sermon, but before I speak, kind of like I do, before I start diving into any dialogue, I kind of preface it with some thoughts. And then, boom, we get into it, right? Sutras are like this. Sutras are like, memorize this. Now, understand that what you're memorizing is about this. Makes it a lot easier to memorize, yeah? But if I move to another state and talk to an entirely different culture, or maybe class, financial class, whatever, their understanding of the world is different. So I'm going to teach them the same sermon, same exact words. Here's the song, sing it. But I'm going to preface it in ways that they will immediately inculcate meaning in the song. That's the structure of the sutra. I've never heard anyone else say this, but after 40 years or more of study, this is what I know. It's quite obvious. So here goes the song. Then the Lord of Mysteries again questioned the Buddha in verse. So now we're going to hear the actual teaching of the expedient means in its full in the song. How, world-honored one, do you explain the arising of Bodhi in this mind? That's a little different than the way it was phrased before, yeah? And by what signs does one know that one has generated the Bodhi mind? How do we know? Right? I know some of you have asked that, if not all of you. What's Buddha like? What does it feel like? When I sit in front of my Butsudan and I chant, focused on my mandala, what am I to expect? Well, I've talked about that a million times, but the thing is, it's not relatable as a chair or table or a house. We've already discussed ad nauseum how Buddha-ness, Tathagata-ness, has no characteristics. That's its main characteristic. It's just being in the process of formation. So I would say, if you're really insistent on knowing what Buddhahood is like, stop asking about it and just do it. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. That's it. Penetrate your Gohonzon. I beg you to explain the arising of the knowing mind, the mind, and excellent spontaneous knowledge. All a bunch of words saying the same thing. What is it like to awaken Buddha? Awaken it, and you'll know. Right? It can only be known amongst Buddhas. Remember that quote? Great striving hero Mahavira, through how many stages does the mind successively arise? This is before the teaching of the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment. Hell, it's before the teaching of the 10 worlds, the 10 realms, within the 10 realms. Because this question really touches on that, right? How many stages does the mind successively arise? That word kind of throws it. The mind is always arising in every single thought moment. The way in which it arises is the whole ball game here. I beg you, O Buddha, to explain in full the characteristics of the mind and the time necessary to attain Bodhi. Like it's some kind of, I don't know, track and field event? Even then, it's a nonsensical question, right? As well as the massive merits and the practice of cultivated practices, the mind and the distinctions possessed by the mind, please, O great Muni, explain them. Oh, in case you haven't heard that before, Muni is part of the root of the word Shakyamuni. Why is he called that? Because he's of the Shakya clan, and he's a great sage, a Muni. So here it is. Please, O great Muni, explain them. So who do you think the great sage is at that point? I know they've been using the Vairochana name, which is an instantiation, an invention of Shakyamuni's as a personage that the story revolves around. But who do you think the great Muni is? It's not Vairochana, because he's an imaginary being. The question's being asked of Shakyamuni. Now, I wish they would make that more distinct in the translation. Maybe they're not aware. When Vajrapani had finished speaking thus, the world-honored one, Mahavairocana, addressed him, saying, so maybe, remember the device, Shakyamuni is saying, you won't hear from me, let me invent this authority that maybe you'll hear it from. Maybe that invented authority is simply the Buddha-ness of the interlocutor, the questioner. Maybe it's coming to his mind as a result of asking the question, yeah? In the presence of Buddha-ness. Ah, interesting way to look at that. So Shakyamuni now says, via the personage of Mahavairocana, excellent true son of the Buddha. With your magnanimousness, you benefit sentient beings. The characteristics of the successive arising of the mind, moment to moment to moment, the supreme state of the great vehicle, the Buddha wisdom, are the great secret of the Buddhas, unknowable by non-Buddhists. Because by definition, a non-Buddhist isn't aware of how the mind works in this way, the contemporaneous instantiation of being. They just take it as an aside. Yeah, I'm here. I'm Paul. No, you don't get it, right? They're not studying the criticality of the mind's work and the process of life that a Buddhist does. I shall now reveal it all. With single-mindedness, there's that word again, you should listen attentively. What's another way of single-mindedness? What's another word? What's another sound? What's another characterization of single-mindedness? Namu. Single-mindedly I invoke Buddha. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. It's easy for us to see through all this rhetoric because we practice Lotus Sutra Buddhism. But this is all the teaching that leads up to it, right? By transcending the 160 impure states of the mind, vast merits are produced. And their nature forever firm, one knows that Bodhi has arisen. So, saying it in another way, what I was saying earlier, when transcending the identified 160 different, it doesn't even matter that you know each one of them. The point is that you're shifting your mind's focus from the attachments of daily life that you want to hang on to. Let's drag that past along with us. No, be in this moment. And their nature forever firm, one knows that the Bodhi has arisen. Because when you transcend all of those temporarinesses and see the process, which is the same, irrespective of time or space, without time or space, the truth, the engine of reality, of life, it never changes. It's forever firm. When that happens, you know, right? You chant single-mindedly in front of your mandala and you open your Buddha mind. The minute you stop, you know you will have been someplace else in your mind. You will have perceived time, space in a completely other way. It is immeasurable like empty space, unblemished and everlasting. He's trying to explain what this sensation of Buddha-ness is. But until you do it, these words, they're just malleable. Dharmas cannot move it, and it is originally quiescent and has no differentiating characteristics. Man, if you go back 10 years to videos that I did on the origination of life, the origin of life, the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment. I've done recent ones, but go look at the old ones. I have charts that I put on screen that say exactly these words. A non-differentiated state is a quiescent state of energy. That's the only word missing in this sentence. It's taken as for granted that everything is energy. It's just in a quiescent state. I'll read it again. Dharmas cannot move it, no matter how you, from what angle you look at Buddha-ness. It's the one thing, the one vehicle, that common to everything in the universe. and it is originally quiescent and has no differentiating characteristics. Once again, Shakyamuni reminding you that if you're looking for characteristics of Buddha, you missed the point. Buddha-ness is free from all of that because characteristics are identifying marks. And what is the root of identification? Possession, fear, anxiety, stress. We're liberating ourselves from that, so how could we possibly have another set of characteristics? That's why I keep saying Buddhism isn't mystical. It isn't magical. It just is as it is. If I sat here and gave you all sorts of shapes, colors, identifying marks, which you'll read about that in early teachings, the 32 identifying characteristics of a Buddha, they're not about Buddha-ness. They're not about enlightenment. They're about some provisional attachment to a type of body, a type of human. That's not Buddha. Buddha is in the mind. Immeasurable knowledge is accomplished, and perfect and full awakening manifests. Cultivating the practices of resolve, one thereby generates the Bodhi mind for the first time. Once again, and this is far earlier teaching than Nichiren, right? This is like 6th, 7th century China. And this is from 3,000-year-old teachings. And already very clear from the start, from any early sutra, the idea of single-mindedness, focused energy, training your mind to just blow apart all of the baubles, all of the bullshit that we accrue constantly to identify self. It's not that we want to get rid of the self, it's that we want to disconnect it from all the illusory negotiations we've made to identify it. Our true self, if you will, to play with language here, is non-identifiable as a thing. It is this mind coursing through time with the depth of appreciation that arises a compassion completely outside the realms of simple human life. An all-encompassing compassion. Very powerful. Lord of Mysteries, and now we're in the dialogue again, we're not in the recitation. Which, by the way, the audacity of this translator used the word worship. I have a whole video on that word. You can research it on this channel, find it for yourself. Buddhists don't worship. We focus and we instantiate. Real talk. Not, well, one day I'll be like you. You know, go on a game show. It's so stupid. Word does not belong in the lexicon of Buddhism. Lord of Mysteries, ordinary people, foolish and childlike, who have been dwelling in beginningless birth and death, birth, death, cling to the notion of self. I'm going to hear my own words here. And to the possessions of the self, identification, and differentiate among immeasurable distinctions of the self. Man. Yeah, that's samsara. That's what humans do with our minds. Lord of mysteries, if they do not discern the own nature of the self, then notions of I, mine, are born. In other words, as I just finished saying, if you don't discern that this trick of self is rooted in all life at the same moment, without characteristics and all the characteristics and defining characteristics, modes of energy, that's a fascination. It's not a separate entity. It's part of one process. We are all sharing, albeit from our certain composite of karma. That's the fascinating thing. We're not truly different. We're just expressing, manifesting differences. But at the root, we're all the same. We're all from the same exact process. It's a hard thing to grasp, but you experience it when you chant to your mandala. That's what's happening. When the mandala starts to do weird stuff, when the lights go up and down, when your mind is struggling with remaining attached to this stuff, but you're pushing through it single-mindedly, instantiating Buddha, it rattles. It's like a spaceship coming back into Earth, going through the atmosphere. It vibrates, it gets hot, and then blue sky. And you get it. Others again imagine that there exists as the prime cause time. The transformation of earth and other elements, the self of yoga, established purity, unestablished non-purity, or the god Ishvara, or emanation, or time, or the revered, or the spontaneous, or the inner self, or self in the measure of a man, or the completely adorned, or life force, or Pudgala, the person, or consciousness, the alaya, storage consciousness, where this tally of karma that is going moment to moment through time, that you identify with. The knower, right? These are all words used by several sects in and out of Buddhism. The seer, the grasper, the grasped, what knows internally, what knows externally. He's going through all of these earlier teachings, like Vasubandhu, trying to tear apart all these different mental creations of knowing, of experiencing, that are all earthbound. We're transcending all of that. But he's listing them out here. What one knows, intelligence, right? How many things have we read where, the Lotus Sutra, regular people aren't intelligent enough to know that? It has nothing to do with intelligence. Mind born. The mind is the birth. So how is it mind born? That's just an idea. That's a dream, a fascination. That's not the actual quality of mind. Youngster. Here's a weird one. Maybe hubris. What is eternally and determinately born? Like there's anything permanent. We know long before this sutra that nothing is permanent. Impermanence is one of the core teachings of early Buddhism. So how that gets in here, I'm not sure. Sound and non-sound. Lord of mysteries, such distinctions of the self have since times of yore been associated with false differentiation. They've been seen as differences or characteristics, yeah? And the adherents of these views Hope for liberation in accordance with reason. Now, Buddhism is about reason and rationale, so I'm not sure how this got twisted in here, but I'm going to take a stab at hope for liberation in accordance with reason by reasoning that liberation from those differentiations and characteristics is in itself, by not being, I don't care about my stereo system anymore. I don't care about having I don't even want to drive anymore. I don't need a great car or anything. I have no desire to drive. I have no desire to eat. I have no desire. Oh, because you have not desire for any of these things, you must be enlightened. No. They're missing the point. Yes, the rhetoric is about a desirelessness, but that lack of desire isn't what might be interpreted, and often was in earlier teachings in Hinayana Agama Sutras. Lots of sects became nihilistic. We have to destroy the self to reach enlightenment. That's just that far away from the only way to reach enlightenment is to die. And that is absolutely not. That's the opposite of Buddhism. But see, words can be mispresented. We're not trying to... It's in the words itself. When it talked about the self, ordinary people, foolish and childlike, who have been dwelling in beginningless birth and death, this idea, the samsaric attachments, moment to moment to moment, and differentiate among immeasurable distinctions of the self, right? They cling to the notion of self and to the possessions of the self. And what I've talked about many times, but in this context, the reason I use the word identification is because the trip here, the tripping block, the misunderstanding is that the self is constructed of, identified of the possessions, the things around you are what define you. Even down to your hair color, eye color, flesh tone. Right? We identify with those characteristics. And we think, because that's where we think from, that eliminating our attachment to those aspects of self, that we are left, the remainder is enlightenment. When in actual fact, what we're doing as Buddhas isn't concerning ourselves with any of that. We're making a paradigm shift. We're saying, okay, I see life from here. I've identified everything from right here. But now, Namo Myo Renge Kyo, I'm going to identify from here. That's all well and good. I don't need to get rid of it. That's samsara. But I'm going to identify my true moment-to-moment instantiation energy with the perception of all of this doing the same thing. Not identifying with it, but becoming an observer of it. That's our true self. And that's what breaks down the distinctions, the differentiations, the characteristics, because it's all one. There's no need for differentiation when you really get it. And that's a very powerful realization, because at that point, nothing can intimidate you, because there's no characteristic it's violating. You either do or not. Totally confident, totally manifesting your life moment to moment. It's an incredibly powerful thing and almost impossible to describe with words, yeah? It's a sensation. It's a knowing. It's a resolve. It's a confidence. It's a revelation. You could say those are characteristics. That's the fallacy of words. Experience it. What is externally and determinately born, sound and non-sound, Lord of mysteries, such distinctions of the self have since times of yore been associated with false differentiation. And the adherents of these views hope for liberation in accordance with reason. Reason here being used as a word defining differentiations or unattaching or liberating, separating oneself from, without, though, identifying the true self, the Buddha self. It's missing here. It's confusing here. Lord of mysteries, ordinary people and their ilk, foolish and childlike, are just like rams. At times, a dharmic thought may arise, namely, the thought of observing abstinence. But that's still an attachment about attachments or detachment about attachments. See, it hasn't made the shift. Reflecting on this small thing, they engender joy and practice it from time to time. Right? It's just like diets. I'm not eating that fat food anymore. Never going to do it again. And they do it and they feel better and they keep it out of their diet and they're losing weight. They're feeling better. And a couple months go by and they're like, well, I can have one piece of cake. Well, how have you detached yourself from it then? It's always there at the ready, isn't it? You're just constantly stressing and anxiety prone about everything you put in your mouth. That's not detachment. You're fooling yourself. False distinctions. Do you see? It's funny. Lord of mysteries, this represents the initial state of the seed from which wholesome actions arise. See, if you recognize that the paradigm shift is going to require your better observation of your habit energies, then when you first start to notice your habit energies, and that's when you first start to practice, that happens immediately. You start to say, wow, I don't do that anymore. Wow, it's been a while since that. We start identifying all of these little shifts about our self-nature. But that's because those are all superficial things that we've gained in the few years of our life thus far. But as we practice more and more, we start to dig deeper into our karmic engine, right? And some of those changes affect changes that influence other changes that influence habits that it's hard to perceive them. They're not right there in our face. Over time, we'll get it. Maybe with an umbrella sort of, these karmic habits have modified or moved out or no longer there. We may not see specifically each and every energetic manifestation that is the creation of our life. Yeah? But that's also when it becomes a little more difficult to practice because we don't have so much validation unless we stop entirely. And then it doesn't take long before stuff starts happening and you go, oh, I recognize that as something that's not new. That's something I long ago forgot existed in my life. Oh, crap. I know how to, Yeah, I got off the train. I need to get back on the rails, yeah? Then, with this as the cause, on the 6 days of abstinence, they make gifts to their parents, male and female children and kinsmen. This represents the second stage of sprouting. So he's making an analogy here to success, like the diet. You start losing weight, and then you can't wait to tell everyone about how to lose weight. Well, that's kind of a bodhisattva thing. It's just based on not altogether enlightened goals, but still positive, right? Life affirming. Then they present these gifts to those who are not kinsmen or acquaintances. This represents the third stage. There's the real bodhisattva work, right? When you reach out to people you don't even know, and you've got to give them advice. You've got to show them what works. Well, this is the work of a bodhisattva in Buddhism. I'm just using a secular, and so is he, example. Then they present these gifts to those of competence and eminent virtue. This represents the fourth stage of leafing from budding. Then they joyfully present these gifts to musicians and so on, and proffer them to venerable elders. This represents the fifth stage of flowering. Then, with these gifts, they engender thoughts of affection and make offerings of them. This represents the sixth stage of bearing fruit. Next, Lord of Mysteries, they observe the precepts so as to be born in heaven. This represents the seventh stage of taking in seeds. Heaven? Really? Next, Lord of Mysteries, I'm going to start calling him Misto. As they transmigrate through birth and death with this mind of the seventh stage, they hear the following words from a good friend. This is a God, a great God, who bestows all happiness. If you worship him with devotion, all your wishes will be fulfilled. Oh my God. This sounds like a sect, I know. These gods are namely Ishvara, Brahma, Narayana, Samkara, the black god, Rula, the son of Ishvara, blah, 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 blah. Let's name all the gods we know. What a load of crap. Each of these should be duly worshipped. Upon hearing this, their hearts are filled with blessed joy, and respectfully revering them, they practice accordingly. Misto, this is called the eighth stage of the mind of the young child. Aha, finally. The basis of fearlessness for common people, foolish and childlike, as they transmigrate through birth and death. That's the great illusion, isn't it? There's religion, my friends. You owe your diet to God. Worship him at the altar of lettuce. It's crazy. Misto, next there is a special practice. Following their friend's instruction, they dwell in a special state whereupon there arises the wisdom that seeks liberation. Because guess what? You just got trapped. You need liberation all over again. You have achieved nothing. This is namely the teachings of permanence, impermanence, and emptiness, and they follow these teachings. Misto, it is not that they understand emptiness and non-emptiness, permanence and annihilation. With regard to both non-existence and non-nothingness, they consider what they differentiate to be without differentiation. Right? How is one to differentiate emptiness? They do not know the varieties of emptiness, and so they will never be able to know nirvana. Therefore, one should realize that emptiness is disassociated from annihilation or permanence and permanence. This is exactly the point I was making earlier, right? Just because you attach yourself to a different behavior doesn't mean that you've annihilated behavior or that you need to annihilate the self. There's no annihilation here. It's a new paradigm, a new realization of all the same stuff, but without the anxiety, the stress, the attachment, the keeping permanent, the ownership. I don't know how many ways I can say it. All right, 50 minutes. And then Vajrapani, if I could remember that instead of Lord of Mysteries, Vajrapani made another request of the Buddha, saying, quote, "World Honored One, please explain those various states of mind." He's really having trouble understanding the teaching, right? But Shakyamuni is just giving himself another opportunity to approach this very difficult to understand shift to the people he's teaching, right? So that's what the sutra is. Oh my goodness. Here we go. This is going to sound very repetitive, but this is the nature of critical thinking. Let's explore every single minute possibility here so we don't find an escape from the truth that we can latch onto and, I got mine, right? This incredible craving for identification. So now we're going to identify every single manner of description we can for mind. Here we go. When Vajrapani had finished speaking thus, the Buddha addressed him, saying, "Vajrapani, listen attentively to the characteristics of the mind." This is a complete fallacy, right? Characteristics of the mind. Since you're glued to the idea of characteristics, since you're glued ineffably from identification, let me list them all out for you. They are, namely, namely, the mind of covetousness, the mind without covetousness, the mind of anger, the mind of kindness, the mind of stupidity, the mind of wisdom, the mind of decisiveness, the mind of doubt, the mind of darkness, the mind of clarity, the mind of accumulation, the mind of strife, the mind of disputation, the mind without disputation, the mind of a god, the mind of an Ashura, the mind of a Naga, the mind of a man, the mind of a woman, the mind of Ishvara, the mind of a merchant, the mind of a farmer, the mind of a river, the mind of a pond, the mind of a well, the mind of protectiveness, the mind of parsimony, the mind of a dog, the mind of a cat, the mind of a garuda, the mind of a rat, the mind of singing, the mind of dance, the mind of drum beating, the mind of a house, the mind of a lion, the mind of an owl, the mind of a crow, the mind of a rakasa, the mind of a thorn, the mind of a cave, the mind of wind, the mind of water, the mind of a fire, the mind of mud, the mind of dye, the mind of a plank, the mind of confusion, the mind of poison, the mind of a noose, the mind of fetters, the mind of a cloud, the mind of a field, the mind of salt, the mind of a razor, the mind like Mount Sumeru, the mind like the ocean, the mind like a hole, and the mind of rebirth. Vajrapani. What is the mind of covetousness? It means to conform to defiled dharmas. Because it's not what you covet that's the story here. It's that your mind covets. Why does your mind covet? How does your mind covet? It follows misinformation. It follows identification. It follows making permanent. That's a defiled dharma. That's not the way the world works, the universe works, life works. What is the mind without covetousness? It means to conform to undefiled dharmas. Same thing. Whether you covet or you don't, what rules your covetousness is the same delusion, that you can or cannot or won't covet. What is the mind of anger? It means to conform to the dharma of wrath, which is in the world of hell, to remind you. What is the mind of kindness? It means to conform to and cultivate the dharma of kindness. It is a way of being, but it's still a characteristic, isn't it? What is the mind of stupidity? It means to conform to and cultivate the dharma of non-examination, non-critical thinking, just doing what you're told or repeating the same meme without analyzing what you're doing, what you're actually thinking, what you're actually saying is true without analyzing it is no closer to truth than cow poop. Although there's a truth to that. What is the mind of wisdom? It means to conformingly cultivate dharmas that are special and increase one's understanding. Okay, that's a wise, life-affirming endeavor, but it's still a characteristic, yeah? What is the mind of decisiveness? It means to carry out as told the instructions of the venerable. Oh, that's interesting. A different point of view there than I would have thought. What is the mind of doubt? It means to always keep things undecided and so on, because there's a certain comfort in not taking responsibility for your thinking. What is the mind of darkness? Why do I say that about undecided and so on being not taking responsibility for your thinking? Because if you have doubt, you study and you remove the doubt. But if you're not motivated to study to solve your doubt, then you're irresponsible. It means to produce, the mind of darkness, an understanding based on misgivings with regard to dharmas about which there should be no misgivings. You're spooking yourself. What is the mind of clarity? It means to practice without misgivings with regard to the dharmas about which there can be no misgivings. Just do it. I realize some of these definitions are slippery because you could say, well, that's authoritarianism. I wouldn't say you're wrong, but let's take the whole thing in for its meaning rather than isolate one thing to be stupid and focus our attention on, yeah? What is the mind of accumulation? It means to be naturally disposed to make what is immeasurable one. Identifying. I have all this stuff. I look this way, or I can make myself look this way. And all of that, well, it's me. That's the mind of accumulation. What is the mind of strife? He didn't mention that one earlier. It means to be naturally disposed to argue with others about the pros and cons. Oh, interesting. You're just argumentative. That he identifies with strife. Okay. What is the mind of disputation? Which you would think is what he just defined. It means to produce pros and cons within oneself. You can't make your mind up. Because on the one hand... What is the mind without disputation? It means to discard both pros and cons. So you're no better off, really. You're just falling down the tree, yeah? What is the mind of a god? It means that the mind's thoughts are accomplished as one conceives of them. You're just making it up as you go. Wow, what a criticism of a god, yeah? You're just making it up as you go. I like that. What is the mind of an Ashura? Okay, he's going to go through every single mind, right? What is the mind of a river? It means conformingly cultivate the dharmas of relying on two extremes. What is the mind of a pond? It means to conform to the dharma of thirsting insatiability. In other words, the world of hunger. So he's going to go through all of them. I'll let you read them all because there's a ton of them. What is the mind of the crow? Dun, 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 dun. What is the mind of... I'm trying to get to the end of them, folks. Mind of fire, mind of mud, mind of dye. I told you, it's a critical mind. It's going through every aspect that you could think of defining a mind. My goodness, it goes on and on. I like this last one, though. I'll finish with this one. The mind of the ocean. What is the mind of a whole? It means to naturally dispose, first decide something and later amend it. What is the mind of rebirth? It means to habitually perform all manner of actions and be reborn in accordance with one's previous actions, and the mind is of the same nature. So if you're not working to grow, which is really death, and we've talked about this before, we experience life moment to moment to moment to moment. We see it linearly, but it is the previous birth-death cycle that continues through time to re-manifest itself per the tendencies and conditions of what the previous moment held. This is important to know simply because that's falling through life. That's the natural process of karma, does what it does, and it modifies itself by virtue of its experience and its tendencies and conditions. As all things arise, decay, and dissolve, so does your freight train of karma, yeah? As Buddhists, invoking enlightenment, we can influence that train. We can influence that innumerable instantiations, manifestations of karma, so that in the very moments as we chant, we are influencing life, our experience of our karmic freight train, yeah? Our momentum. Like a ball rolling down a hill. If you could just stick out your finger and touch the side of the ball as it goes by, you will affect its direction, its momentum, all of it. You won't turn the ball into a car, but you'll affect the ball. Nothing magical here. So, well, where are we time-wise? I've gone on too long. All right, we'll pick this up. Paragraph 3b. I hope, let me know. I think it's fascinating reading these older sutras. You can see from our perspective, being Lotus Sutra Buddhists, we can see the bigger picture and we can see where this is headed. It's like, at times, blindingly obvious. You might ask yourself, how do these people not get it? Well, that's because we're of a different capacity in a different time. And we're practicing the ultimate teachings of Shakyamuni, what he meant to teach all along. So the truth, it just really anchors us to the critical points, doesn't it? What's fascinating is seeing how he had to manipulate his teaching to reach certain audiences that weren't capable of seeing, understanding, perceiving, shifting perception paradigms as we are able to. It's both a wonderful thing and a terrible thing, because as good as we are as shifting our perception, there are incredible mechanisms surrounding us to take advantage of that in order to benefit them. And we become easy tools of influence. It's a little bit scary. Social media has really made that obvious. Yeah. So it's all the more important, essential, that we take back that influence for ourselves. Namo Myo Renge Kyo. This is the time. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your practice. You guys are awesome. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share. Yeah. And, the podcast, download them. You guys are buying books and mandalas, and it makes me super happy because at some point I'm going to be able to get a better computer and make even better videos. I'm just happy to be able to do this and reach as many of you as I can now. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I will see you in the next one. Promise. Bye for now.